Welcome to the Aiki Dojo Podcast. I'm Bill D'Angelo from the Aikido Center of Los Angeles with...
I'm James Doi with the Aikido Center of Los Angeles.
So James, welcome to the Aiki Dojo Podcast. I think it's going to be a great session. Today's topic is Aikido and aging. So I wanted to start, I guess, with a very blunt question, given that's our topic. How old are you?
I'm going to be 74 in November.
Wow. So when did you start Aikido?
The fall of 1969 at the University of Southern California.
So that's 57 years.
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty incredible.
Well, it is what it is. I mean,
yeah. So you started when you were an undergraduate at USC.
Yes.
And that's where you met our founder of our school, Furu Sensei, correct?
Yes, correct.
And was that an on-campus club, or were you just recruited and you came and trained at the dojo?
No, it was an on-campus club.
On-campus club.
I had heard from a cousin of mine. I was interested in judo.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my cousin, who was he was a basketball coach at the University of Hawaii. This would be about 1965.
Wow.
And he said, well, no, it's very good, but there's this thing called Aikido, which I'd never heard of before. I had no idea what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I went to SC, there was posters up for a student club.
Oh, wow.
And I go, oh, wow, great. And then it was just Furu Sensei.
And did you know Furu Sensei before college?
No,
I didn't. So that's when you first met him?
That's when I first met him, yeah.
And did you train all 4 years when you were an undergrad?
What happened was he taught the first year.
Mm-hmm.
Then he went to Harvard, I thought. And then I changed schools.
Got it. So, I mean, we've been friends a really long time. I mean, I've known you for, well, as long as I've trained at our dojo. I think it's close to 34 years.
That's true. I was thinking about 30 years. Jeez.
So one reason I was really looking forward to this podcast is we're old friends, but we're also old training partners.
Yes.
I've taken a lot of ukemi from you. We've done demos together. And I'm catching up to you. I'm 59 this year.
59, really?
59. So for me, this topic is really germane, and I'm really glad that we're having the opportunity to talk. And I mean, I kind of want to throw some, kudos towards you. I think you are the most senior practitioner in this dojo, correct? I believe.
Senior in the sense of the years spent, yes.
Number of years training.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty incredible to think it's 57 years. Reflecting on that, maybe at a very high level, what does aging in Aikido mean to you?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, the old story about one day you wake up and you're old? And basically that's what happened to me.
It happened.
It just occurred, and it's like, yeah, 70-something, that's what life expectancy for a male in the United States is, 76 or something like that. Anyway.
Well, and also if you look at the history of humans, it's like double what the people used to live to in the earlier centuries.
Average age.
Right, average age.
Average
correct.
age, yeah.
But I mean, was there a moment in your training in those 57 years where you're like, oh, there's an inflection where you started to change the way you practiced because of your age? Or is it, because I know in addition to doing Aikido, you do Iaido as well. You've trained Iaido for a long time.
Yeah, no, there's no conscious or even unconscious change because of age.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I said, I mean, I basically thought of myself more or less as 17
right.
until I was in my mid-60s.
Is as you've had some time to reflect on this, have you noticed, how do I phrase this? Do you think there's misconceptions about doing martial arts as you get older? Are there judgments that you think you've learned are not true that the average person might make as kind of a snap assessment?
Well, I mean, that's interesting. elder martial artists, what's that image? Basically the old kung fu master Po kind of thing.
Kill Bill.
With the beard. Yeah. I mean, that or...
But that might be a positive, right? Because if you think of those characters, I mean, I know that you and I both grew up watching martial arts movies. The character that you're invoking is always usually is not only like transcended physical technique, but they've achieved a state of wisdom and mental awareness. So I think the trope in movies and literature for the older master is, in addition to the physical technique, they've achieved some level of mental awareness and enlightenment. Do you think that sort of cultural meme has application to your own training and what you've learned about yourself?
Only in the sense of that was kind of my image of age itself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The other image is it's literally a crime to be old and poor.
Mm.
So basically, in general, I think society has it's when you're in your 30s, well, actually, basically until his mid-60s, didn't really want to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Either you have some sort of somehow reach enlightenment kind of thing when you get old, or you're just sitting around and
not doing anything
and just waiting to die. And it has a lot to do with because you never really think you're going to get old,
right? And then you do.
If
you're lucky.
Yeah, that's the other thing. The old live fast, die young kind of the 27 Club, the Jim Morrison's, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix thing. They all died at 27 kind of thing. Yeah.
But when you're saying that, one of the things I think of is going back to sort of like the white bearded kung fu master meme, right? Is as you're referring to, our culture has this sort of youth focused energy, right? We immortalize young beauty, young attitudes, but it's interesting that maybe society doesn't, especially in the internet culture, looks down on older people. But do you think like one of the reasons why you gravitated to Asian martial arts is there is a built-in respect system for experience, which is measured by age?
Possibly. I mean, if subconsciously I make a joke that says, take the pebble from my hand, grasshopper joke, but maybe deep down I wanted it.
Right. I mean, what's interesting is I think you touch on something I think Free Sensei used to talk about a lot, which is focus on your training that's right in front of you, right? Because when I asked you earlier, just a few minutes ago, I said, have you noticed at an inflection point as you gotten older in your training? And I think your answer was not really, which I think is interesting, because I think some people would think that, in fact, there would be a moment.
Well, maybe I can modify that. Inflection point in the sense that, a lot of Aikido has some very mysterious concepts of ki and stuff like that. And I sort of went along with it, but I couldn't make it work. It's only within the last decade, it's like, oh, that's what it was, and it will work. And so in that sense, it'll be an inflection point, not an inflection point, but more like a exponential with a huge induction time, and then at the end it pops up. It's kind of like a retirement fund, compound interest. It's just like you don't think about it. It doesn't really do much for a long time until the end, and then it's, holy crap, look at all that stuff there.
Well, one of the things you're saying, which I think is super interesting, and we've talked about this off the mat, on the mat, is what you're saying is it isn't so much that I got a realization or epiphany about myself. I got the epiphany about the technique, about Aikido itself, which seems a very interesting thing. I'd love to have you try to flesh that out a little bit.
That sounds kind of grand, but yeah.
Yeah. Is there a specific technique that you found revealed itself the most as you got older? Because there's millions of techniques in martial arts and in Aikido. Is there something in particular that you're like, oh, wow?
Well, recently, it's Ikkyo.
Ikkyo.
Okay. Now, it never. I always felt that you either do the quote crude version of breaking the elbow, which is in virtually every martial art,
Right.
okay, or you do the very nice ikkyo where you take them down, you pin them, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, but I never had the if I was in trouble, I would use ikkyo kind of feel. I have that feeling with nikyo because it has a lot of mechanical things which you can overpower. But then recently I started playing around. When the Aikido Jiu-Jitsu version of ikkyo was shown, and then I realized it's kind of a spectrum. So in other words, I started seeing the range of the techniques and how it works in different situations and why.
Did you, when you saying you had this revelation about ikkyo and the progression, and then one day waking up and saying, "Oh, this is how it really works"? Do you recall an actual practice session where that happened, or was it you were working on ikkyo and then you were home one day and you had like a vision about like what was that process like? The sort of this technique enlightenment is kind of how I'd call it.
No, what I use as a criterion is basically confidence in the technique.
Okay.
And then, I can see if I really needed to do a technique and ikkyo presented itself, I would be confident in doing it.
It makes sense to you.
It makes sense to me. Whereas before I would think like, well, the situation calls for it, but I don't know.
Not sure I can pull it off.
Yeah, you second guess yourself as opposed to this will work, kind of idea.
Was there a specific attack that helped you realize this, or is it ikkyo against any particular assault? Was there a specific, was it shomanuchi, yokomanuchi, a ski? Was there some traditional Aikido attack or non-traditional attack that you had that first realization about ikkyo?
Well, I mean, the point of it could be used different ways, but primarily a showman-like attack. I mean, I realize that showman is not really, it's not in the syllabus of most
martial arts today.
because it, basically you're taking your most sensitive parts of your body, that is your fingers, and hitting against the hardest part of, that makes no sense. But in terms of teaching, that's why Aikido has it. And it also comes, if you look at it technically, it comes from showmen, from
sword strike,
from sword cuts, which is unstoppable.
Yeah.
So if you understand theoretically how to deal with that kind of stuff.
Let's dig in a little bit on aging in practice. Are there certain things about how your body works, whether it's mentally or physically, that have changed as you've gotten older in practice?
Well, yeah. I mean, the obvious thing is that your peak physically at 25, right? And then you go downhill. If nothing else, your muscles atrophy and everything else. Okay. The first thing with Aikido, of course, is the physical activity. So you basically do strength training and you build up the muscles more than the natural decline. And the other one, of course, is as you learn technique, you have that. So you have two graphs, right? In fact, Sensei talked about that, so that you start physically declining around 25 and you start going down to whatever age. And then hopefully if you're doing Aikido regularly during that time, you're rising up very slowly until it rises up, especially with Aikido. And that it turns out most people, especially O-sensei, your peaks is in your 50s.
Right.
Which I didn't realize until Sensei mentioned it. I think I was 65 or something. I thought, oh, crap, I missed it. I missed it because I've always, for instance, when I was in grad school, I was like in my 22, 23.
Mm-hmm.
I felt I missed out on life because, I didn't realize that, wait a second, it hasn't even started and you don't even know what you're talking about yet.
But James, I mean, I know that I was coming up when you were already a senior. I mean, you practice often. You've always practiced often. Has there been a change in the number of days a week that you normally train?
No.
No. And what is that, like 3 to 5?
4.
4. So 4 days a week. It's a lot. And that's basically stayed the same.
Well, 2 to 5, yeah.
Do you change the days that you train now to emphasize recovery, or do you not even worry about that?
I haven't. That actually is a good point, which I've realized I have to put in recovery time.
You have to plan it out.
I should, yeah. I haven't been thinking about it, but yeah, you're correct. I just recently realized I was doing like stretching kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I hadn't been doing it in a couple of days. And then suddenly I can do stretches. I thought, oh, why was I struggling for weeks and weeks? Because I had the recovery time,
Right.
which I hadn't thought about.
Have you had any injuries that have gotten worse, or you've had to really teach yourself how to work around that you think might be age related?
Yeah.
So what particularly have you been dealing with, and how does that affect your training?
Well, I like essentially everyone else has knee problems.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Which is interesting enough is when the first year at SC, I had just learned Aikido and then showing essentially unbendable arm, you and then Hammi position and like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, whoa, I mean, if you do it right, you're really strong and stable. So I was playing dorm football, and I thought, I'm going to block that way. I had never played football in high school or anything. I'm going to block this way. It didn't work. It just snapped out the meniscus on my left knee. So I was on crutches for, 2 or 3 months. And that has always bothered me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, once it healed, I did normal stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I notice when you train that you'll do Shiko and Surawaza if you need to, so that it doesn't seem to have slowed you down too much in that area.
Well, what happens is getting older, it's less stable. Apparently, the fast twitch muscles were holding it in, so it didn't really bother me. And as I got older, interesting enough, I found that if I do things like jumping jacks or something which has a spring in the foot,
Motion. Mm-hmm.
apparently it's been helping because my leg has been feeling much better.
So that really comes to a question that you sort of touched on earlier and you're glancing at now, which is, do you have a specific training program to support your Aikido? So you mentioned you do some mobility and stretch work. Do you do any weight training or aerobic training or anything so that you feel like you're in the best shape you can be when you train? Or do you use the training itself as your physical challenge?
Well, more in the sense of that the routine, I think of it more as a routine.
Okay.
Like a wake-up routine, like a cold shower in the morning kind of routine. And that the training is training. And if it helps it, fine. Oh, and the other thing, of course, is that in Mountain View, like Chief Sensei was part of the Zen temple.
Mm-hmm.
When I was there, I did a lot of Zen meditation. Mm-hmm. So I've always tried to meditate, okay, which got really hard. Hard in the sense of that I would fall asleep, at night after work. So I thought, no, that doesn't work. I found that if I do a modified Misogi breathing, it seems to get the same effects.
Wow. Okay. Well, here, I guess this is a very broad question, but over time, have you noticed certain techniques are harder and certain techniques are easier? I mean, if that's even makes sense from your experience.
Harder in the sense of stuff where you have to go long distance with a step and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Of course I can't because the legs are going out. So I modify it. So I make it, quote, easy by changing it.
And then the changing it, so it sounds like you're saying the spacing gets a little bit different.
Oh, yeah, much different.
Is it collapsed? Is that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just can't move as far. Because that's a very common thing, is that everyone's legs goes out. And I never really understood what that meant. That means that you don't feel stable and you can't move the distances that you could when you're younger.
So,
but you modify it. If you understand, or at least you think how the thing works, then you just change the parameters a little bit.
So when you say modified, and again, this is age related, does the accumulated experience help you understand better, how a conflict emerges that allows you to not have to move as fast to still get into the correct position?
Well, that's spacing.
Yeah.
Timing and spacing. So you modify the.
Is there an example that you could share with us that you think is really illustrative of that modification that you make?
Well, part of it is understanding the use of atemi. Mm-hmm. Atemi, which is really interesting, is like Yoshida Sensei's translation of Buddha Renshu. Okay, if you look at it, there's always an atemi in the front.
Yeah.
But the reason being that the atemi is to set you up, right? Mm-hmm. It changes the spacing, and therefore gives you more time, and it also, basically you also start earlier.
Right.
Early in the sense of you don't sit there and wait for a grab. You say you can do an atemi, and their only response is a grab like positioning, which you are set up for. Mm-hmm. Sort of like a bullfighter, right? You know how like bullfighting, what the picadores is.
The guys who stab the back of the bull.
Yeah, you know why they do it?
Slow them down.
No. Because they do it in such a way, and they wait until the bull will react the same way all the time.
Oh, okay.
So in other words, if it pulls to the left or right, they would stick in a little thing to make it so it doesn't want to do that, and then it gets consistent. Once they know it's consistent, then he can do the fatal thing. Which, by the way, my understanding is what they do is they stand directly in front of the bull, and then they wait for it to go into a particular stance, such that the shoulder blades open up, and then that's why they take the sword to go directly over the horns into the heart. And that's why it's scary as hell, right? If you don't know what the thing, if it does something, if you can't predict it will do that, there's no way you're gonna,
So what you're saying is that with accumulated enlightened experience, you're able to know or anticipate how people are going to move. Like you've developed this sort of dictionary of movements in a way.
No, you set them up.
You set them up. Okay. What does that mean exactly?
You lead them into little traps.
Okay.
You make them do that. In fact, that one you can do, for instance, ikkyo. You can do an ikkyo by doing a sort of fake kung fu backhand hit. The natural response is to put the hand up, usually with the elbow up high, perfect.
Right, it exposes the elbow for ikkyo.
Yeah.
Well, this is interesting because you do hear this, that there's talk in the martial arts community that getting older, slowing down, not being as explosive, allows you to get better at Aikido.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier about Furyu Sensei. Sensei Ito had the theory, at least told me, that he thought that maybe he had to lose his physical strengths to move on, to modify, to learn, to make you progress. I'm beginning to think that, because then you don't. If you can get through something by just brute strength, great. Until the brute strength goes away, then you didn't understand what's going on.
Right.
Yeah, and then, so in some ways, the handicap helps you out because
you can't muscle a technique anymore.
Well, you have to look for alternatives,
mm-hmm.
and you can't look for alternatives unless you really understand the technique. That's probably true of anything, really.
Yeah, it's past cultures used to put a lot of value on the more senior members of a community. And one of the things I think is really interesting about Aikido specifically is seniority, assuming it's combined with experience and well thought out attitude, is becomes a resource for everyone else. Like, do you find? I mean, we haven't really talked about this, but you've been an instructor here for a long time. Do you notice that the things you've learned through growing older in practice translate into the way that you teach Aikido?
Yeah, of course.
Is there an example you can share? Let me phrase it a different way, maybe as a backup. Do you find that as you've gotten older, the ratio between training versus teaching has changed? Or has it pretty much been the same?
Well, you have to be careful because I have noticed it's seductive thing to be a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
to say all this stuff, and and it's great, and especially as you get older, people don't question it. So that I try and work out as much as I can.
Yeah.
Force myself to, even if I don't want to, because it can be a really seductive trap to be,
You mean from an ego standpoint?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so training when you're not teaching keeps the ego in check, in a sense, is what you're saying.
It doesn't keep it in check, but
You work on it.
you don't work on the bad stuff. The bad stuff isn't fed.
Do you find, again, as you've gotten older, do you gravitate to one type of practice, either weapons or teaching or being a student in a regular class? Like, is there something that as you've gotten older, you're like, oh, I'm going to do more of that, and I'm not going to do that? Has there been any thought on that?
Yeah. If you have to take a lot of falls, you tend not to do it because you get tired.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And my ukemi is falling apart because of a lot of stuff.
But you still take ukemi.
Oh, yeah.
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 So you still do.
Yeah.
That hasn't changed.
But it's not as clean as I would like.
Yeah, not as smooth.
Yeah. And
Do you notice that, like, I think about what weapons mean in martial arts, and I want to connect this to age in a second. Like, my understanding of the way weapons as a tool, they were the things that allowed, like, early humans to hunt animals much larger than them. Like, you can't punch a woolly mammoth to death. Like,
yeah.
you will get killed. But if you have a couple guys with spears or bow and arrows, you can take down this much larger opponent. So if you then put that into the human-to-human context, the weapon allows someone, maybe slower, not as strong, not as tall, to project force and win a confrontation. So do you find that you do more weapons now, or that you use the understanding of the advantage of weapons more as you've gotten older?
I understand the value of that, the great equalizer Colt 45 idea. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But then the thing is that it's hard. Weapons are really hard.
Yeah.
Because every martial arts practice, open hand against a weapon, statistically,
It's an uphill battle.
Yeah. Uphill may be impossible if they really know what they're doing with the weapon. I mean, that's the whole point of a weapon, right? It gives you a what do they call it? A multiplier effect.
Force multiplier.
Force multiplier.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But do you find, like, the theory of weapons, which is allows someone with less force to combat someone with greater force, do you ever try to take that idea, analogize it into your hand-to-hand practice as you've gotten older? Like, are you able, being a senior Iaido practitioner and having done weapons for a long time, and you teach an open weapons class, do you see a parallel between the way weapons work and the way older efficiency or understanding works? Are they similar?
In fact, it's central. I mean, the old idea of Aikido being for smaller people, women, old people, is true. You don't use that much power.
Yeah.
Okay. And weapons is the same idea. In fact, that's, I think, why we have weapons training
In Aikido?
in Aikido, specifically for that. I guess if I understood your question, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
And it's more than just supplemental. I think it's essential.
Do you think openly and to yourself about things that you want to pass on because you have this additional experience to the younger members of the school or in Aikido community in general?
Only recently I've been thinking that way, yeah.
Really? Like,
I mean, sort of legacy, right?
Legacy,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So do you like have your own time with yourself where you meditate on what legacy means and then have a plan to implement that legacy, or is it just now starting to dawn on you?
Just now I'm deciding, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think, leaving aside the physical technique to the side, do you think that as you've gotten older that you get a certain mental advantage from experience, from all that data, all that training, all that conflict? Do you feel like when you walk on the mat that you've got this sort of age premium? Like all that experience is a quantifiable benefit?
Yes and no. Okay. It gives me authority to people,
Mm-hmm.
but not in the way they think.
And what do you mean by that?
Okay. Both of my parents were in the concentration camps. Okay.
Yeah.
And like with all the immigration arguments and stuff like that, if they said an opinion, no one would attack them.
It has more weight.
It has much more weight, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Because of the suffering.
yes, exactly. Okay. Now that both my parents are gone, I have inherited that authority,
Wow.
which I don't deserve,
Right.
right? On the other hand, if we got into a heated discussion about immigration, racial relations,
Which
stuff
is
like
topical these days.
yes,
Yeah, for sure.
I can immediately sort of say, listen, right? I mean, the
Right.
fact I pointed out, that kind of puts me in a different realm. I don't deserve it.
Right. But it's sort of like cultural and institutional memory inside you that got handed down. But I guess my question was, like, I mean, Aikido has a senior junior structure.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
so that's a traditional senior junior structure. You're senior. Do you find that like you have a different mental edge, and that you said earlier you have a legacy, you're starting to think about that. Do you think in a way different from, let's say, outside business culture or current politics, that the value of seniors in the traditional martial arts is something that makes getting older better, more enjoyable, more interesting? Sure. Yeah.
Sure. But the thing is, I think what I'm trying to point out is it's not what you think it is. When you're younger, it's not what you think it is.
Mm-hmm.
In essence, you are giving that power to the older person.
Right.
It's also Japanese culture too, or Confucian culture.
So, like, in terms of things that change as we get older, especially in a traditional martial arts, like, do you notice any difference in how patient you are in practice, either with yourself or a training partner? So, for example, does all this experience allow you to be able to train with a beginner who doesn't know what's going on, who doesn't understand? Do you feel more compassionate when you're training with people that are significantly more junior to you?
Well, sure.
Yeah. Do you ever have conversations with younger students about that, or is it just an organic transmission?
Yeah. I think it's organic, yeah. Well, to give you some ideas, like the sensitivity of movement and setting them up and stuff like that, it now seems obvious, but then it's pretty clear that it's not obvious to people. Mm-hmm. Before I thought, like, don't you see it? Don't you see it? I used to wonder why, Sensei used to get really, really pissed off. He says, do this, do this, do this. And they didn't do it. And they're frightened to death. And he says, don't do it. They won't do it. Yeah. It's because you, and then in retrospect, I remember, because you couldn't.
You don't know.
Yeah.
So you bring up a really interesting thing, which is actually going to be my next question. Because I know I have feelings about this. Has how fear factors into your training changed as you've gotten older? Are you less afraid? Are you more afraid? Like, are you afraid of being injured? You're not as afraid about conflict because you've been in thousands and tens of thousands of practice conflict? Has fear gotten bigger, gotten less, different things you're afraid about as you've gotten older?
Well, the common fear, obviously, as you get older, is falling. And that...
Yeah, we've talked about that.
I've been real, that, yeah, it's real. I mean, and part of it has to do with how much you can control your body and how much you feel.
But what maybe if I can just jump ahead here for a second, but tell me if I'm wrong. As Aikidoists, you spend your whole life falling.
Yes.
Like 50% of your practice, you're either doing the technique or you're taking a fall or a pin.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you hear about this as a benefit for senior practitioners of Aikido, which is the chance of you actually getting injured when you're older and falling goes down because of your decades of training. Do you think that's still true?
Sure,
Yeah.
Of course. In fact, every Aikidoist, over 5 years, 10 years, has a rolling save my ass story, right?
Right.
Everyone. So that, but I mean, to some extent, the surprising thing is that there's a natural growing fear of falling as you get older.
As you get older, yeah.
And that Aikido helps, but it doesn't alleviate.
Doesn't push it away completely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's really interesting because, you hear in the medical community that if you're over 65 and you fall, you have a serious fall, like it has mortality consequences.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, it's like people that have a serious fall over that age often don't last very long. But if you've been doing Aikido for 40 or 50 years and you've fallen tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of times, that anxiety's got to be less. I would assume.
It's less.
Yeah. Have you had a fall where you're like Aikido, like in the last couple of years, where you're like, oh wow, I'm really glad I did Aikido and I kept me out of the hospital?
I've had one which was really interesting. It was like I was walking on the hall at work, reading a report or something, and you know how they have those little cones that say, cuidado.
Right. Be careful.
Because it's wet. Well, anyway, I was walking down and suddenly I fell down. Okay. Got up and walked out. And then I didn't realize how bad it must have looked because I looked over and the janitor.
People were aghast, yeah.
Oh, the janitor, I mean, she had to look like, oh my God, I'm fired because I killed someone look. And then I realized, when I fell, I gained a lot of air. My feet were off the ground, probably about a foot.
Wow.
But because of the...
So did you end up in like a side fall? Like a...
Yeah. I slapped it.
It's like a modified break fall.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah.
More judo kind of break fall. But the point is that if I hadn't done...
It could have been bad. It could have been bad.
Oh, it would have been real bad. I know it would have been. But at least collarbone...
I mean, it's interesting that, the Aikido is almost like an airbag in a sense for your body. And I wonder, in addition to the mitigating falls or the concerns about falls, is there anything else you've noticed that, being on the older side, that Aikido makes better? Not necessarily about the technique or the timing, but just in terms of your own well-being as a person. Has now being a senior practitioner made you happier or less anxious? Or like, what are the things you think that all this training, besides the self-defense component to it, which I know you're very interested in, but has there been some other type of change that you're like, oh wow, like, all these years did this to me, like an advantage that it confers?
Well, you have to remember, I don't have a control group, right?
Yeah.
And that's always a problem. But having said that, I think I'm glad I've been doing Aikido for this time. I don't have any regrets.
Yeah. Is Aikido your favorite thing to do?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
But you've been committed for a very long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you find, like, one of the things that's interesting as I've gotten older is a lot of, especially in our dojo, we practice a lot of Kihon Waza, like basic techniques over and over and over again. In fact, we have an annual curriculum that goes through the basic techniques. Do you ever worry that you're going to get bored when you're doing a basic technique, or do you find that every time you're in practice, especially as you've gotten older, that you like the repetition or the simplicity? Like, because I think for some people doing this for 60 years and you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, it could go two ways, right? One, it could be like that discipline of doing repetitive practice builds enlightenment, or you could get bored. Do you ever worry? Which of those do you think more applies to you?
Well, I don't get bored with them because the thing is that usually I don't feel I've mastered every technique.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In fact, like I said, the only reason I like certain techniques is because I'm confident it'll get certain levels. Yeah. Okay. Which means that other techniques constantly, even though I've seen it for decades, it's like, oh, I can see things in it. It's like a good movie, right? You see it over and over and over again. If it's a crappy movie, you'll get bored.
Right, but if it's a great movie,
the better it is, the more you can watch it. And the more you see, the more you get out of it.
Do you find when you're teaching, as you've gotten older, that you like to teach different things?
As I've gotten older, it's getting harder because other things are changing. It's hard to, which is difficult because I've come to the realization after decades, and then how can you show someone who just started?
Because of the gulf of experience.
That's one problem. Or it's interesting is that you discover, no, this is basic. And that somehow, which is a revelation itself, right?
Traditional martial arts has this other aspect to it. You mentioned ego earlier. Do you think that having been a longtime practitioner of a traditional martial art, that it's changed how you deal with your own ego? Are you more humble now because you've seen all these experiences? Because I think there's a thing in our culture. There are people that when they develop some level of expertise, they can kind of put it in people's faces, and there can be a little arrogance attached to it. But do you think that the nature of long-time practice of a traditional martial art moderates ego and allows you to develop like a positive humility?
Well, that's the intent, right, of a Budo, as opposed to purely a technical fighting training.
Mm-hmm.
It presupposes some sort of deeper. It's a physical vehicle to get to something more deep. The whole lineage of Shaolin Temple, Zen, Misogi, all that kind of stuff.
So kind of what you're saying is just like there's a distinction between like Aiki Jiu-Jitsu and Aikido, that one way to look at that is very similar to our own personal timeline, that you have to focus on the technical aspects of the training. But as you get older, the life-changing aspects of it in terms of your personality, your ego, your humility, your happiness, that has a bigger share. And then, as you say, that's a do. It's a way. It's a path that you follow rather than a set of things that you master.
It only becomes evidence as you do it more and more.
Mm-hmm.
You probably should be introduced throughout your
training. Yeah. I would just say for the person who's been doing it for a long time, and they start to get into their 50s, maybe 60s, maybe even 70s, what wisdom do you have that you can say, hey, you should do this and don't do that?
If they're doing it that long, they're figuring it out.
Yeah. As an individual.
Yeah.
But is there anything that you see, whether it's beginners or even more senior people that are still very young, are there things that we do when we're young that you're like, oh man, now that I'm an older practitioner and I've got all these decades of experience, like if I was starting over today with all that knowledge, are there things you would have immediately changed, or not really?
Not immediately, no.
Anything that you would change?
Just structural things. Just try and figure out what the optimum way of getting to what you identified is. For instance, now I'm trying to figure out how, definitely needs some sort of strength training, whatever that means.
Mm-hmm. To keep the body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely not machines, because machines restrict you to certain things and they tend to build up obvious muscle groups as opposed to,
Coordinated action.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned, this is something we haven't talked about, but you just mentioned it a few minutes ago about older beginners. Now, in my opinion, we've been blessed at our school with people that have started when they're young, but we've also had a few really outstanding students that have started when they were older, in their 50s, 60s, even maybe 70. I find that super inspirational because I try to imagine at my age, like just walking into the dojo the first time, and I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I'd be able to do that. But people do, and they do really well, and they practice, and they train, and they grow. Do you have specific thoughts about starting a martial art in your 50s or your 60s, knowing that, I mean, even if you start at 60 and you live a good lifespan, you're still going to train for 20 years.
Oh, yeah,
maybe.
yeah.
So do you have like thoughts about that, about how, one, obviously you have to have a lot of courage to walk in the door at 50 or 55 or 60.
You have to be a special person, obviously, because, well, it's also psychological. I mean, usually someone, quote, usually, will say, no, I can't do it. It's too dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
There's too much, blah, blah, blah. The person that walks in the door obviously is, I've always thought about it. I always wanted, then it's great. I mean,
So do you think, and what I think what you're saying is there, to some extent, if someone comes into the practice on the little bit older side, that they've got more intentionality and commitment because because it's a big risk.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you interact with older beginners, do you change the way you teach them at all?
Only in the sense that they want different things.
Like what's your experience been that older beginners are looking for in their practice?
No, I mean, some guys are really interested in the sort of key aspects, key KI, the
Right.
idea of flow and, little
harmony and things like that.
Yeah. Like
Things
that.
that we don't talk a lot about in our school, but some schools do.
No, well, my take is that it's not exactly what they had thought it was.
Well, what do you mean by that's interesting?
Well, I mean, for instance, technically, everyone knows that, oh, sensei, don't fight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, don't fight can also be turned from a technical point of view. That is, don't freeze up and use your upper body to try and do something. But then it can also be turned in kind of a pacifistic point.
So other than like an older practitioner who starts might not be as flexible, might not be as supple, they might not have had any experience in ukemi. What do you think, and again, from a perspective of having this immense amount of experience, are there things that, like, for the person who's, let's say, 55 watching this podcast, and they're on the fence, they're like, I've always wanted to do Aikido. What do you think it is that gets them across the line? And then once they get into the school, what do you think, with all your experience, that you just say to the older practitioner, like, you should focus on this right now? Is it ukemi? Is it learning how to attack? Is it mobility? I'm assuming you're going to assess for injuries and all those kinds of things.
I think kind of depends in the sense of, past experience. Obviously, if
you're athletic, for example.
Yeah, if they're athletic or not.
Yeah.
Probably they will be, though, because for someone, if they're not coming from another martial arts, they're probably pretty, like skiers or surfers or something, yeah. And they already kind of are the kind of person that will pick this stuff up pretty well.
Do you think there's something specifically about Aikido as a traditional Japanese martial art that it does a couple things, one of which is it does have a path for older beginners, and it has a good path for older practitioners. Whereas, like, I could think of some other martial, like, do you want to be bashing your head in boxing at 70? Like, that may not be a safe activity. But is there something that you've realized about Aikido where you're like, anybody can do this at any age and grow?
Yeah. I mean, mainly because it was engineered that way, right? The whole idea.
What do you mean by that, engineered that way?
Use less strength.
Mm.
And you really, really have to work on being, quote, you know, the hard and soft theory of martial arts, you know, okay. Aikido is considered a soft martial art, but the sense that it's hard to develop, very, very hard to develop the sense of well, softness in the sense that, well, a good example, it's much easier to work real hard and to strain, to use a lot of strength, than it is to relax.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, for instance,
Because soft and relaxed are not necessarily the same thing.
yes, that gets to the next point.
Yeah.
It's a balance, the perfect balancing of it. So that doesn't require physical things, but it's really damn hard. And that the trouble with older, if you enter older level, you don't have the time to make that transition.
Right.
I'm not even sure, you know, I'm only recognizing within the last few years,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so to be that, basically real sticky hands, to be able to do sticky hands properly.
You know, asking all these questions, it just makes me think a lot about how, I mean, there is a movement in our culture in America for people to take care of themselves and extend their workable life, like physically, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's a good thing. But I tend to think that the advantage Aikido has in that arena of extending your workable life is a mix of things. One, it's like learning about your own body. Two, it's about being safer in conflict, whether it's just falling down or some other type of conflict. And then there is also the community aspect to it, right? It's a social practice. I mean, you know, boxing's a social practice too, but you know, you could hit a heavy bag on your own every day for 30 minutes and get some benefit from it. Is there anything about the social aspect of Aikido that you found beneficial or surprising as you've gotten older? Does the community aspect of it take on a bigger share of the frame?
Kind of two parts. First of all, it's very difficult to practice Aikido by yourself in your house. You really do need the feedback of another human being.
Mm-hmm.
So that's immediately social, right?
Right.
Okay.
And there's all kinds of benefits from that you don't think about.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. In fact, that's one of my real regrets about my relationship with my wife. She always wanted to go dancing, and I never wanted to go dancing. And only recently have I realized that couples dancing can be an incredible supplement to Aikido.
Wow. Okay.
Because you've met Phil Wiener, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sure.
He's really into tango. And then he started telling you about like Jack Arnold and, well, Watanabe Sensei. He does a lot of couples, or did.
So, but you're bringing up something which I think is really interesting as it relates to martial arts practice and age, and just how it works is, like, I'm not a great dancer. Natalie's a dancer, but when you dance with a partner, it's about communication, blending, understanding without saying anything.
Yes.
So, have you noticed, you know, in your practice, again, in the context of being older, the fact that Aikido is this very unusual activity that we do with other people, but we don't talk, generally.
Well, think about what you do when you're talking. For instance, now we're trying to exchange information, right?
Right.
Okay. When social conversation is something else, it's a little playing around, a little this, and okay, it's a wasted time. You're not really, you're hiding stuff and stuff like that.
Right.
Okay. That's why it's best not to talk. And that's where you get the advantage, is that you start using your other senses of communicating.
Right. Touch, movement.
Yeah, which is an interesting revelation, because how do you teach that? You know.
Do you find as you've gotten older that the nonverbal aspect of Aikido, like you mentioned earlier that you like to meditate, right? Some people call Aikido meditation in motion. I don't know if that's my thing, but I know some people say that. Do you find that being a meditator, again, in the context of being older, does the nonverbal aspect of traditional Aikido training, like, add to your personal well-being? without necessarily having to do the meditation.
It's not so much the nonverbal is a factor. It's just like a realization that, oh, it's kind of a symptom.
Yeah.
If you're dealing with the quote essence of any Buddha really,
Mm-hmm.
then talking is not a good thing. Only in the sense that it provides a shield for people that are trying to avoid the real. Yeah, you know what I mean.
So James, we're trying to focus into a summary on this. Reflecting on everything you said today, and I want to say thank you for all the thoughts. Do you think that there are specific misconceptions that people have about getting older in martial arts, which now, having had that experience, are like, yeah, I see why people say that, but it's not really true?
Well,
Like, for example, I can't do martial arts because I'm 54. Like, that's, I think, a misconception. People think I can't do that because I'm past a certain age, and only young people should start, very high level physical activity.
you can obviously practice it. It's just that what you can't. It's what you want out of it. You're not obviously if you start at 55, you're not going to get to the level that all of us here are.
But does that matter?
That's the point.
Yeah.
Does it matter to you or not? If you say, well, first of all, if you want a good exercise, you'll get a good exercise. If you want to at least see what all the talk is about, why do these people talk this way? Why do they think this way?
You'll learn it.
You'll start learning it. Yeah.
I mean, I think of, like, for me, the biggest misconception about doing martial arts when you get older is people think you just physically won't be able to do it. And I think you pretty much made the case that that's not true. Are there any other preconceptions that, people starting when they're older might have that you want to say, no, you really should start, no matter what your age is?
Well, again, it's like it's how you sell it. I mean, in the sense of, like, if it's sold as purely a physical activity which will enhance your health, yes, and it's more interesting than working on a machine. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you want to be a real badass, you want to be the killer granny kind of stuff, you actually could. I mean, we could gear our teaching that way. I mean, little tricks here, little here, yeah.
And I think one here's a question that I had that's very specific about a preconception. I wonder sometimes, because I've talked to a lot of people that are older and thinking about it, I think some people might think that the path to rank, like, leave aside technical ability, but just the path to rank is more difficult when you're older, because you might think when you're older, I have less time, and rank takes 30 years to accumulate. Do you think that one of the benefits of starting later is that ego connection to rank is less an issue?
Well, first of all, I mean, we both know that. I mean, in popular culture, a black belt means you're an expert.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we know that means that you just got your high school degree, and you know the basics, sort of.
Right. You're going to go to college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And learn the real stuff.
But do you think, like, one of the benefits of starting when you're older is you're less concerned? Because I think
I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know either.
Personally, I think you shouldn't think about it, because if you do, you'll get all tied up in all kinds of crap.
Right.
But if that motivates you, that motivates you. But I'm.
Well, I mean, I have a final question, which I kind of saved to the end, and I don't know whether you'll want to answer the question. But I mean, one of the things that I think of as I've gotten older, and being on the other side of 50% of my lifespan of what I can expect, I've had friends and family have gotten sick and passed away. And so I think everyone who gets older at some point has feelings about mortality, about dying. some people accept it easier than others. Some people don't. Is there anything about your Aikido training over all this time that has been a weapon against that anxiety, the sort of anxiety of death?
Well, it is Aikido, but it's more the Zen training,
What do you mean?
the Buddhist concept of what's going on. Okay. The thing that got me was like once, I don't know how people view it, or the listeners view it, but things like reincarnation and even heaven and earth, it's kind of like, fictitious fairy tale kind of stuff. But then someone pointed out, during Zen training, obtaining whatever this enlightenment is, it's virtually impossible for one lifetime. Therefore, you have reincarnation because you basically have for some reason the cosmology is such that this is how, quote, the Buddha and Bodhisattvas obtained enlightenment, because they went through a hell of a lot. And then so that, well, maybe in a less specific point, the whole idea of process as opposed to end.
Yeah.
Okay. Or someone pointed out, I was reading with, the Western linear concept of time versus the Eastern circular concept of time, cycles and stuff like that.
Right.
Therefore, mortality, without sounding like, Lion King, it's a circle of life kind of thing.
Right.
Right. And that's easier to take than, okay, well, even Judgment Day, it's you're born, you die, and that's it.
Right.
Kind of thing. Or it could be just like what, The Sopranos, you just flip the switch, it goes dark, end of.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
basically it helps.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you. I mean, I think that's a really good place for us to wrap up, because that is the backstop of getting older. Right?
Yeah.
We all have to face that. And I really appreciate you sharing everything that you did today. Is there anything else that you want to say about aging in Aikido that we haven't covered that you'd like to get out there?
Only that this is kind of a technical point. You can get really good in Aikido and still survive to old age, as opposed to something like Muay Thai. You get really, really good, but you can't last past 40.
Right. You can't practice it at a high level.
Yeah, because you're messed up. And Aikido is one of the few things, again, because technically you don't need the power, you don't have to take the punches.
So Aikido, in a sense, is part of a longevity practice.
It could be.
Yeah.
It could be a very good longevity practice.
That's super interesting.
Don't you think so?
I do. Yeah. I actually do. I think that, I remember when I was in college and thinking about different martial arts, I started in Greco-Roman wrestling. And I didn't, because I was a knowledge worker, I didn't want to have my brain bashed in.
Yeah.
And I think like everything you said today really goes to this vector on Aikido, that it really is something that not only improves your life at the moment you're doing it, but it improves the quality of your life as you get older. And you can keep practicing. Not everything in life you can do your whole life. So I mean, I really admire your dedication and training and respect all the time that you've been in, and you've been a great teacher and a great friend. So I just want to say thank you for sharing all your thoughts today. I think we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you for watching the Aiki Dojo podcast. Please like and subscribe. And if you have comments, please send in comments so that we may address them. Thank you again.
Thank you.